Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Google, Apple, and Spotify podcasts, and also check out the Sonic Cinema Patreon. We're more or less wrapped up for the year over there. I just shared with some of my patrons my 10 favorite new watches as well as my 5 favorite rewatches of 2020 because I had a lot of time to catch up with older movies, whether they were ones I had seen for the first time this year or ones that I was watching after a while. And that's all at patreon.com/songcinema. There are only a handful of movies left in the class of 1999 that I did not get to last year, and one of those is one that I've been really looking forward to talking about is Anthony Minghella's The Talented Mr. Ripley. Join me to talk about the movie is somebody who's been on here quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to the discussion again today. Actor Timothy J. Cox. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Brian. Always happy to be back.
I remember when this first came out. This like a lot of movies that came out in 1999. This came out with a lot of fanfare, and part of that was because of the fact that this was Minghella's follow-up to The English Patient, which had basically swept the Oscars a few years before.
Sure.
And then you think about the cast. This has Matt Damon as Tom Ripley, Gwyneth Paltrow, fresh off of her Oscar win, Cate Blanchett, who I actually, when I first rewatched the movie last year, I'd completely forgotten that she was in this for some reason. And she was coming off of her first Oscar nomination for Elizabeth. And then you had Jude Law, who ended up being Oscar nominated in this movie. And one of the things that's so just beautiful about this movie to watch, apart from the fact that it's just a beautiful movie, is the way it really just it plays like one of the most elegant thrillers that Alfred Hitchcock never made. And it feels very Hitchcockian in that.
It is definitely. I mean, Patricia Highsmith, who wrote a series, I think, of 5 books with Tom Ripley, the character of Tom Ripley. You may not know that she also wrote Strangers on a Train, which, of course, Alfred Hitchcock adapted into the famous movie. This is an elegant in the style of Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, if this were done in the 1950s, I mean, you could see Grace Kelly playing the role that Gwyneth Paltrow played, or even seeing someone like, I mean, you could cast it, very like Montgomery Clift, like someone, I mean, just immediately comes to mind, or a Brando or a James Dean, playing Tom Ripley. This is an extraordinary film. I mean, in that class of 99, of just the movies that, I mean, of course, we discussed The Insider, and then you have American Beauty and The Green Mile and The Sixth Sense and many, many, many others. This one really stands out just because it's an elegant, classic thriller. And I mean, it was a controversial novel when it came out in the 1950s because of, the kind of, it deals with the fact that homoerotic, feelings that the character of Tom may have for Dickie, and back in the 1950s, that was a taboo subject. And it's just, I mean, in every respect, this is just, it's a textbook example in great movie making. You have the wonderful cinematography of John Seal, edited beautifully by the great Walter Murch. Anthony Minghella, like you said, coming off his Oscar win, he just peppered it with this amazing cast, which also included Philip Seymour Hoffman and Philip Baker Hall, the late great James Rebhorn, and it's just elegantly shot, and it's just a beautiful film, and it's amazingly enough, it's actually a very it's a wonderful exploration of the people who live the quote unquote charmed life. Like Tom Ripley wants so much to be Dickie Greenleaf that realizes that Dickie Greenleaf himself has, you know, his own issues, which of course we'll get into. But no, this is an extraordinary movie. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, and in addition to the other people that you mentioned, there's also just an absolutely gorgeous score by Gabriel Yared.
Oh yes,
in this movie, and I've always been a fan of this score. It's one of the things that I've really appreciated over the years, and it goes so well with the cinematography of John Seal and the way this movie is lit and the way that the setting of Italy, just the fact that this is such an elegant movie, and the fact that it really um there's a lightness to the way this movie is shot that is very much old school Technicolor, like you said. I mean, it could very easily have been in that Alfred Hitchcock 50s with like To Catch a Thief and The Man Who Knew Too Much and
yeah.
even North by Northwest. But one of the things that's so great about this is the fact that you've got this absolutely gorgeous setting of Italy, and it contrasts with the fairly dark story that we're seeing unfold, and that's one of the great things. I mean, the direction from Minghella and the cinematography are so much of a key to this movie's success, and a big part of that is how they stand in contrast to the narrative that's being told.
Well, that it gives the appearance that it's going to be this, you know, charming and elegant, and that all along you see. I mean, and in the casting of Matt Damon, who has this boyish charm, you know, it completely stuns you when the acts of violence that take place, and just um, how committed he is to wanting to be Dickie Greenleaf and to be in that world, that he is willing to do anything for it. And I think that's what makes it shocks you, like, oh wow, what happened, what just happened, like that's the mark of a good thriller. You know, it catches you by surprise. And you know, I mean, and that's I mean, I know that when the movie came out, there was a lot of criticism about the casting of Matt Damon. I mean, the role was turned down by Leonardo DiCaprio. I think Matt Damon is outstanding in the film. I think the boyish charm that he has, that he's able to get into the world using his charm, using the smile, using the awkwardness, that it's a performance. That and I think that you know, as they find in the film, the other characters kind of underestimate him, and that's the sinister. And he doesn't do anything where it's over the top. He just, there's a subtlety to it that it's unnerving. I mean, I think Matt Damon is one of the best, and he's one of the smartest actors in the industry. You just look at the choices that he's made, and I think this was one of his. I don't know if this was one of his follow-ups to Good Will Hunting, which of course this is a very, very different role for him, because in Good Will Hunting he had the kind of the swagger, the, you know, the tough guy. Tom Ripley, on the surface, you know, you look at him, you know, he's a very kind of gawky, kind of awkward, you know, as Dickie Greenleaf says, you're so white. I mean, like, you know, he doesn't get out, and you know, so it's a wonderful contrast, and just showing the range that Matt Damon could bring to a character. But as we learn, as we watch the movie, he is not to be underestimated, because there's this obsession. He is going to be a part of this world, not even just a part of this world, but he is going to be Dickie Greenleaf. And that is just to watch that transformation. It's terrifying to watch.
Yeah, and it's interesting because of the fact that it's like you almost there's a certain part of you where when he first tells when he first tells his initial lie that yes, he went to Princeton with Dickie to his father,
Yeah.
and then you start to wonder, like, as the film goes on, it's like it's obvious once he's ingratiated himself with Dickie and with Marge in their lifestyle that they're living, that he very much wants that to be his life. But it's interesting to see it's interesting to wonder whether that was necessarily whether it was necessarily his intention straight out of the gate, or whether it was just like, oh, he's an opportunist. He's going to get this all expenses paid trip to Italy to do this for, his father, and we'll see what happens. And it's interesting that you don't really get that laid out in the movie. It's very ambiguous, but it becomes less ambiguous, but his motives become less ambiguous once he meets up with Dickie, played by the fantastic Jude Law, who was Oscar nominated for this movie, and he really starts to live that good life that Dickie is living.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about that, it's Tom Ripley was a guy who's been waiting for this opportunity, and when he gets it, he lie after lie after lie after lie, and the amazing thing is, if we and any of us encountered anyone like a Tom Ripley in our life or whatever, or read about this in the newspaper, we'd be like, oh my God, this guy is insane, But in the movie, I found myself in watching the movie again, and I remember when I saw the film, that while he is what he is, I could not help but want him to get away with it.
Yeah.
I didn't want him to get caught because he was so compelling that, like, I mean, of course, you always want, the villain to get their comeuppance in the end. But with him, because the character was so compelling and so interesting and willing to just, what a life that he has to live, because he has to constantly be, living the lie and ratcheting up. And well, he told this lie, then he has to do this. And I think is what is engaging about the character and about this particular film adaptation, that you just, I don't know if I would use the phrase cheer him on, but you don't want him to get caught.
Yeah.
And that's the mark of just a good thriller. I mean, like, you have in Hannibal Lecter, it's kind of the same way. I mean, obviously, if we all met a Hannibal Lecter, we would be like, I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
But it's almost like that's what makes a compelling, I mean, it's kind of like, why in the case of Shakespeare, like why Macbeth is so interesting, or why Iago is so interesting. Of what they can get away with. You want to see what they can get away with next. You want to see how far they can take it. And Tom takes it. I mean, like, there are literally moments where he has to think on the fly of a lie, and he's got to just trying to coordinate and do all of that in the moment. It's extraordinary, and you just see the tension ratcheted up constantly.
Well, and that's where casting Damon in the role is so important, because of the fact that you want him to get away with it. That's an important part of getting that point across. But at the same time, and I mean, we'll talk about it later, it's like you do get to the ending and you feel more for the character in a way, because of the fact that he feels lost.
Yeah.
He's not, and one of the things that's so interesting about the characters that what he does in this movie is very much sociopathic. I mean, he really is not thinking of anybody else but himself. But at the same time, is it just, did that sociopathic nature of him just come out of this particular situation, or is it something that it's just part of his nature in general?
I think it's probably, I mean, I would suspect it's part of his nature, because it's survival. this is how he survives. He can't survive in his own skin, so he has to, put himself in the shoes of, of Dickie Greenleaf, or to be Marge, or even to a lesser extent to Freddie, because he's envious of what Freddie has. Freddie has this connection to Dickie that no matter what, Tom is never going to have, and that sticks at Tom. And of course, what happens to Freddie in the film, and then also I think there is. I think he has a resentment to Marge because of what Marge has, the connection, the romantic, the sexual relationship that Marge and Dickie have, that Tom is resentful of. And it comes down to, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but, just, watching enough movies, especially thrillers, reading enough of them, you just suspect that ultimately, in the end, what they're looking for is love of any kind. But love, I don't know if love is enough for Tom Ripley. I think love, and to kind of, if he could just erase who he really is and just be, the people that he wants to be, the Dickies, the Marges, the, other people that he encounters in his travels in Italy, and also the Tom Ripley in the subsequent novels and stories. I mean, Patricia Highsmith wrote this character over five novels, so we see the character age and grow older over time. So you see that he's always in survival mode. He's always on the run, always in survival. The thing is, he's smart. He's always ahead of everyone else. Even when he has to lie on the fly, he's always ahead. And I think that's where, the sociopathic aspect of it comes into play, is that it's just, you don't know, like, he always has something in the treasure chest ready to go. And that's like, that's a mind that you don't want to mess with that person.
Yeah. No, and it's seeing, and there's a fascinating compare and contrast to be made between Tom and Dickie, because it's like they both in a way they both represent two very different things, not just in personality but also in the lives they live. Because Tom Ripley really is an example of a mediocre white guy sort of just failing upwards. Like he manages to fail upwards. Like, he gets himself into this situation, he succeeds, and he continues to move up the ladder, where it's like, with Dickie, he's very much the personification of white privilege, which we wouldn't have necessarily considered it. They wouldn't have necessarily considered it white privilege in that way, but he feels at that point, he feels like he can do anything.
Oh, and he's incredibly manipulative. I mean, what he does, the young girl that he impregnates and rejects her, and she, drowns herself. I mean, just, whenever I wonder, I'm just kind of like, oh, like, has that kind of thing happened before? Or, that you realize that I remember asking myself when I last viewed it, like, God, Tom, why do you want to be this guy?
Yeah.
Why do you want to be this guy? So, and I think that's the kind of thing that I don't know if Tom comes to a realization of that maybe this guy is not on the surface, he's a handsome, he's a very, he's a pretty boy, he has all of this money, he has, he can get any woman he wants, he has power, and, but really you peel away the onion and Dickie is not that far off from Tom.
No. I mean, basically, it's the expatriate lifestyle. I mean, it's just this idea of like going to Europe, getting away from your family, getting away from your life you had in the States, and just living free without really any sort of consequences. It's like constantly. I mean, look, Dickie's life is appealing to me in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it's like it's that manipulative nature of him that comes through, and that's part of what's so important about having somebody like Damon, who's just naturally charming, and at that point was still very much kind of a kid.
Yeah.
And then you have Jude Law, who's not really much older than Damon at all, but he has he you get this sense that he understands the world a little bit more than Ripley does as Dickie. And
Yeah.
but you also, compared to the charm of Damon, you have the narcissism of Dickie, where it's like, even though you do get the sense that he ultimately cares for Marge, he also, we come to know that he's had an affair with a local young woman who he's gotten pregnant, and he's rejected that, but it's because of the fact that he just doesn't want responsibilities.
Yeah. He
And
just rejects the responsibility,
yeah,
and he wants the privilege, he wants the power, but he looks at relationships and looks at people as kind of like tissues. You
yeah.
get your use out of them and then you throw them away.
hmm And one of the things that's really interesting about Marge, and Paltrow is very good in this movie. It's like she's, because of her lifestyle brand, I feel like people kind of forget the fact that she's actually a really good actress.
I think this is the best. I think, in my opinion, I think this is the best performance that she's given on film. Because she fits, like, her look, like she just fits so perfectly into that time and place, like the classic Hollywood, the look, like the kind of the Grace Kelly, or this. I think she's perfectly cast
Yeah.
in this.
I don't know if I would quite call it her best role. It's definitely up there, but it's funny because you mentioned that Grace Kelly look. It's like she actually played, when a year before this, she actually played the Grace Kelly role in the A Perfect Murder, which was a remake of Dial M for Murder
Right.
from
Yeah.
Hitchcock.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, she is just very good, and one of the things that makes her character so interesting in that is that she's very much a realist when it comes to Dickie. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't really have any illusions when it comes to Dickie, but at the same time, she's also very, you can tell that his behavior has an impact on her.
Sure.
And that's in seeing the fact that basically, having Dickie sort of ghost her after Tom has killed him, and the fact that it's like Tom has basically made himself this sort of intermediary with her, between her and Dickie, who's no longer alive, is just it. You can see where the you can see where the tension in the character and the anxiety in the character really is going to get ratcheted up, to where when she does have her outbursts near the end of the movie, when she comes to start to realize the real nature of Tom,
Yeah.
it is palpable.
And the thing is, I think for Marge, for Gwyneth Paltrow, the character, I think she is the one good thing in Dickie's life, because she loves him. She loves him, warts and faults and all. I mean, she, it's like you said, like, she is fully aware of who he is and what that he's had affairs, but she loves him, and that. And like you said, she is a realist, but she can't turn away, because she doesn't give up on who she loves. And I think Philip Seymour Hoffman's character of Freddie, I think he loves Dickie too. I think he and Marge are the two most important relationships in his life.
Yeah.
Marge is the love, that she could probably, like, she could cradle Dickie in her arms and create the comfort, whereas Freddie is the mischievous, the fun side, and that side also. And just to speak about Philip Seymour Hoffman, of course, left us way too soon.
Yes.
This movie, when this movie came out, this was around the time when he was really starting to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
He had done Boogie Nights, and he had done Happiness, and then this,
Mm-hmm.
and then he just took off. And it's not a big part, but he makes such an impact. And it's just like an example of actors who, even in the smallest part, can make such a profound impact, not just for the movie, for the performance, but for the world.
Yeah.
I think he is. I mean, it's very clear that, to me at least, that Freddie and Dickie have probably had some kind of physical relationship, but that they're both very similar. They have their fun, and they don't make a thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They just do it. They have fun, and they clearly love each other. And I think that's a threat. I think that's a threat to Marge, and I think that's obviously a threat to Tom. And it's just interesting to just watch the relationships between all, how it makes the other characters feel throughout the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and Freddie is without doubt one of Philip Seymour Hoffman's just best creations as far as the way he builds the character in the movie is just fantastic.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, he left us way too soon, and this was around the time he was starting to get noticed more and more by audiences. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned the the idea of tension between Freddie and Marge, but the thing is, I think that it's less pronounced, I think, because of the fact that it's like Freddie. It feels like when it comes to Freddie, Marge, and Dickie, there have been boundaries that are sort of set, and like Marge is more accepting of Freddie because of the fact that Freddie is very much who he's going to be. Like he's very straightforward about who he is, and it's
very blunt. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because of the fact that at the beginning of the movie, when Tom first meets with Dickie and Marge, he's relatively honest with Dickie as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not in the sense, he lies about the fact that they went to school together, but he's very upfront about why he's there. And, he's not afraid to just tell Dickie, is like, look, this is why I'm here. And, and the interesting thing is he doesn't play off, even when he lies about being at Princeton. He says, well, it's like, I certainly heard of you, which gives you a little bit of that buffer to realize that it's like he knows enough in this situation to play up the lie about being at Princeton, but not make it seem like they were good friends or good buddies at Princeton.
Right. Yeah.
So enough of the truth to get him in the door, but also enough of the lie to help him along the way. And but yeah, I mean, with Freddie, it's like he's completely who he is. It's like and you can see where Freddie is somebody who he's almost like Dickie. He's almost the life of the party. Like
but he's fun. But I think also, as we find that obviously he holds Tom in contempt.
Yeah,
because Tom represents. He's an interloper.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, I mean, think about Freddie. Freddie's the life of the party, but Freddie also, he knows who Tom is. He knows, like, I mean, not the con aspect, but he knows that you're just trying. You don't belong in this world.
Yeah.
The world of the charmed. Dickie and Marge may not see through it, but I do. And it's like,
when you think about that scene on the where the four of them are on the boat, and
mm-hmm.
Tom is peeping on Dickie and Marge down below, and Freddie catches him, and it's like he doesn't like he makes it aware that he knows what Tom is doing without really like getting overly upset. It's like, and is that something he's necessarily going to tell Dickie later? Probably, maybe not. It's like that's something maybe he'll leave for himself.
Yeah, I think, and Freddie also, if he witnessed that, and it's like, okay, I'm going to put that in the treasure chest, because he knows that that's going to, if he does that, he's going to do something else, and eventually, I mean, Freddie might find a way, to manipulate Tom. I mean, it's like, it's the characters that they're I think they all have their issues in the film, I think, but really compelling. I think also one of the things that's really worth noting about the movie, and I think we touched on it a little bit, of course, just Italy itself, the art direction, the way it looks. It just gives this appearance that the world that Tom Ripley is entering is everything that he's ever wanted.
Yeah.
The elegant, the parties, the night drinking, the fancy, the cars, the wine, the food. I mean, it would be alluring to anybody, but again, it's always about peeling back the onion. Is that nothing is perfect. No one is perfect. Mm-hmm. And maybe Tom doesn't care about that. Tom's like, well, at least the world, it may not be perfect, but at least it's better than what I was in. Because I mean, I think at the beginning of the movie, what was he, like a busboy or something like that?
So the first time we see him, he's playing piano for a singer at this event that the Greenleaf are hosting. That's how he meets the father. And then we see him after that. He goes to a busboy. He goes to a busboy job. You get the impression that he basically is just doing odd jobs for money and stuff like that, and that's sort of how he gets along in life.
See, I always got the impression that, like, when in the beginning there, when he was playing the piano at the Greenleaf party, I said he begged, like, he saw, like, this party was, like, in the newspaper, this party is going to be happening because I got to get in. That's my foot in the door. Because I think it's like, these cons, like con artists, it's elaborate and it's long planning, and all they need is one little thing to help them in the door. And I think that is like the springboard. Like, he gets in the door with Dickie's father. Dickie's father, like, he befriends him and says, "Hey, I knew your son." And in the elite, like, he sees Tom, the father sees Tom as like, "Hey, I can send you there and you can keep an eye on Dickie and make sure that, and like, just that, it's like the con, like, even began even before the movie started, I think.
Well, and that's interesting because of the fact that you do see the singer's initial pianist after that initial scene, and it looks like he has a cast around his arm, so it does look like he was injured.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's you can definitely get that. Tom's gonna take advantage of this situation.
Sure.
To better get something better for himself, and you see that in it, and you see that when he meets Meredith at the airport as well, and that is Cate Blanchett's character. And it's interesting because of the fact that we talked about this a little bit over Messenger, that this is not the first version of The Talented Mr. Ripley to hit movies, because of the fact that in 1960 Renee Clement directed Purple Noon, which is a relatively loose adaptation of Talented Mr. Ripley. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because of the fact, and I bring that up now because of the fact that I actually just watched on Criterion Channel this morning, was able to fit in before we record this, and I had forgotten about the fact that, like, there's no analogous character for Meredith.
Meredith
in that version.
Yeah, Meredith does not appear in the book. She was written for the Anthony Minghella specifically wrote that character for his adaptation because he wanted to work with Kate Blanchett, as anybody would want to.
Yeah.
And she really adds something as well. I instantly, I just feel bad for her. Mm-hmm. I feel, oh God, if she only knew. But the thing is that she's so determined that I think, I think she's in love with Tom. I think, and that obviously it's a love that can never be.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw the movie, the whole time I'm like, oh God, Tom, please don't kill her, don't kill her, don't kill her, don't kill her. That was the whole, the whole time just thinking, just because I think she is probably the most innocent of the people that Tom encounters. Like that she's just, happens to meet Tom, but is probably the most innocent, I guess.
See, I would say that about Peter. I would actually say that about Peter.
Yeah, that's true too.
Meredith is important because of the fact that initial lie that he tells her that he is Dickie Greenleaf is basically crucial to like everything that takes place after Tom kills Dickie, because of the fact that it continues to be this cog in this story where it's like, so she's aware of, she thinks he's Dickie, but he's still got to be Tom for Marge and then Peter and Freddie.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, you do empathize with Meredith. That is absolutely true. And Kate Blanchett is wonderful in the role. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because of the fact that she's just as sympathetic as a character as Marge is. But she also, in her life, based on what we know of that character, she's much more somebody like Dickie too, where it's like she's an expatriate who, she comes from money and she wants to live in Europe. But she doesn't have that narcissistic personality that Dickie has.
Yeah.
She's just genuinely empathetic and fun to be around.
Right.
But I mean, Meredith is a completely sympathetic character in this movie, and I can't believe I had forgotten the fact that Kate Blanchett was in this movie when I watched it again last year. Because it's like, oh my God, of course she was, because it was just I don't know why it didn't hit me, but yeah, she is so good in this, and it's like you don't see her for a while, and it's only after Tom kills Dickie that she starts to reappear in the narrative again.
Yeah.
And but it's because of that, it's for that contrast with what the con that he has to play with Marge and Freddie versus the con that he has to play with Meredith as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it's like, I think if things had not gone the way they went with Dickie, you could almost see, I don't know, maybe you could almost see, I feel like, he definitely is envious of the life that Dickie has with Marge, and I think to a certain extent, he does want that with Meredith. And you do sort of get the impression that he does kind of want that with Meredith, and so that's why it's part of why he just leans into the Dickie persona.
To give her something that would make her happy.
Well, to give him something that, he feels like it almost is like he wants to do Dickie's life better than Dickie was doing, but he wants to do it with Meredith instead of Marge.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah. It's extraordinary. I mean, like the movie, and of course the book is all of the Patricia Highsmith books. I mean, they've been studied and dissected. Many of them have been made into other movies. You mentioned Purple Moon. Wim Wenders did The American Friend, which was Bruno Ganz and Dennis Hopper as Tom Ripley. And then, of course, we were discussing on Messenger, talking about Ripley's Game, which I think is the last Highsmith novel with John Malkovich, and Malkovich was perfect, but it didn't have.
It's been a while since I had seen Ripley's Game, but yes, he was really terrific in that movie.
Well, it didn't have a. I saw the movie. I was just going through a bargain bin at Blockbuster. That's how long ago I saw it, and I thought, oh, John Malkovich, and Ripley's Game. I immediately just thought, it must be a. And I said, based on the Tom Ripley, and it's a marvelous, and Malkovich is perfect. But again, it goes to show like the character of Tom Ripley. He's always on the go. He never, when he even senses a little bit of danger, he reacts, because you cannot leave anything to chance.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, you told this lie, and if you get caught in it, well, you got to deal with it. And and in his mind, it's if someone dies, it's just a casualty.
Yeah.
But it's funny also, by the time when you see Malkovich, the shyness, of the Tom Ripley in the first Ripley story, all of that is gone. He's very determined, very cold, very I guess you could say almost emotionless. Like it's just a part of it's just part of the game, part of the routine. Yeah. And that's, I think that's what makes it. If you were to watch The Talented Mr. Ripley and Ripley's Game back to back, you would see just the progression of this the character. It's just an extraordinary character.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you haven't watched Ripley's Game, I definitely second Tim in recommending it, because it is a really interesting is a really interesting in its own right Tom Ripley's story. And Malkovich is fantastic in it.
Yeah, I want to say it came out in 2001, 2002, maybe.
It was a couple of years after this.
And of course, I think it came out because the Talented Mr. Ripley was a huge success. $40 million budget, made over $100 million at the box office. And I think on the heels of that, they decided there was a newfound interest in Patricia Highsmith. Sadly, she did not live to see it. She passed away in 1995. She had not lived to see this resurgence. But no, it. And I think in the history, I think she had stated that she did like, I think she liked Purple Moon. I don't know. I mean, of course, there were changes to the script or to the story, but.
Yeah, and as I was watching Purple Moon, I went to the IMDb trivia, and she did like the movie, and she loved the lead performance, but she wasn't happy with the ending. And it's funny because of the fact that it's like it's really kind of funny because of the fact that, I mean, you would almost think that to a certain extent a French version of The Talented Mr. Ripley would end the way Minghella's film does, and it would be an American version of Talented Mr. Ripley that would end the way the French one does.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he doesn't get away with it. But in this one, he does, and I will admit, it's like I do think the ending of Minghella's film works a lot better, but I do think the reveal in Purple Noon is really effective, actually, in rewatching it this morning.
Oh, sure. Well, and Alain Delon is outstanding in the film. Yes. I mean, he's different than Damon's take on it, because Alain is absolutely gorgeous. In the movie, and more, you wonder how this guy how would he have any problem, living the life or living like the charmed life. Mm-hmm. But I mean, looks are deceiving, I guess. But no, Renee Clement, it's a marvelous film. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, and it is currently on the Criterion Channel if you want to check it out. So.
No, but no, I mean, it's and sadly, I don't know if in the film was the talent of Mr. Ripley was successful enough that you wonder if they were going to revisit the other novels in the series.
Yeah.
Sadly, Anthony Minghella, I believe he passed in 2008, I believe.
Yes.
And we didn't have a chance of that. We lost a great writer and filmmaker, and but no, of what would have been. I think it would have been interesting to see Matt Damon, because it's been well over 20 years, to see him revisit the part.
Yeah, it would have been fascinating to see one of these every few years. It's like, and yeah, it would have been great to have somebody like Minghella continue to make these movies, because Minghella was coming off of The English Patient. He did Cold Mountain after this movie, and let's see. Let me bring up his IMDb. So he did, and then he did a movie in 2006 called Breaking and Entering, and he did an episode of a TV series, and that was it.
Yeah.
Before The English Patient, he did Mr. Wonderful, Truly, Madly, Deeply, and A Little Like Drowning. And those were, yeah, he had a very short career, but yeah, he passed away in 2008, and he was a producer on The Reader that came out that year.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a shame because of the fact that it's like he just is a really talented. He was a really talented and meticulous writer and director, and storyteller.
He was also a very distinguished playwright in the theater before getting into the movies. So he had just a catalog of many wonderful plays. And of course, there are friends I know who the movie Truly, Madly, Deeply speaks to them in a very personal way. But definitely a very, very talented writer and filmmaker that we lost too early.
Yeah. And I do want, I brought up Peter very briefly, the character played by
Jack Davenport,
who was best known later for the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. But he is really, that is almost like the character of Meredith. It's just Peter becoming such an important character because of the fact that he becomes a confidant of Marge's, but he also becomes romantically involved with Tom.
Right.
And I think, as painful as brutal as Tom's killing of Dickie is, I think the scene at the end with Peter just is, and the way that Minghella tells that story in just really words more than anything, and just watching Ripley at the in the aftermath of it is just so powerful. It really tells how heartbreaking that had to have been.
Well, and the thing is, for the character of Tom, he had to do it.
Yeah,
he had to Peter. He had to do it, because if he did, it's kind of like closing a book on this aspect of of the con.
Yeah.
And Peter's a loose thread.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think it has to be, like the con, the con artist or sociopath, they have to trust is always, they cannot leave themselves vulnerable, because you get caught when you're vulnerable like that, when you're left vulnerable. So yeah, Peter was a loose end. He loved him, and or loved him in Tom's way, but it had to happen. And it's true, like the way that that's an interesting thing about this movie also. Movies these days with violence, the violence in the movie, like when it's not grotesque, it's not, when the manner and how Dickie is murdered, like it was like when he hit him with the oar, like the slow progression of like just the way that came out, like it was it was still stylish, or even how when with Freddie and then with Peter and all of that.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that, these days, like with violence, like I'm hypersensitive to ultra grisly violent. I just don't think it's necessary. Here though, it was not, it was actually I guess tastefully done, like in a way that it was not grotesque, it was not unrealistic, it was not like a makeup designer wanting to show, oh, this is how we're going to show this guy's face exploding, like in countless horror movies. But it did, when in the moment, even when I first saw the movie, when Dickie is murdered, the brutality of the aftermath, like, because he hit him, and then and Tom just kept hitting him with the oar. He just kept hitting him, and that was Tom just trying to like just knock, just like, Dickie's gone forever, and I just have to I have to stab out who Tom Ripley was, and I'm going to take on I'm Dickie forever. And just that's the impression that I got from watching that scene, and then of course watching it again, just like just the rage that was it within Tom.
No, and this is a very classically made thriller. I mean, it's something that even with the brutality of the scenes with Dickie's death and then Freddie's death later, like, it would fit right into the 50s and 60s without feeling excessive.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's so great about what Minghella does here, is because of the fact that he understands that the impact and the violence is not the bloodshed. It's not. It's the way that it's just the brute force that we see Tom inflict this violence on.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what makes Peter's death so much harder to experience, just because of the fact that it's sound and we don't see it, but we know based on what we had seen.
We know what's happening.
We know what's going to happen. And the fact that he takes out Peter in a way that's really more empathetic, I guess is the only way I could put it, to the brutality of Dickie and Freddie's death. I mean, it really does point to the fact that he had genuine feelings for Peter that ultimately were not there for Dickie and Freddie, because with Dickie, you could tell that the way he treated other people was probably gang to Tom, and he felt like, oh, I can do this life so much better. And Freddie was just he just was somebody who
Freddie was in the way. Yeah. I get the sense with Peter that he was kind of putting him out of his misery, that like, I'm doing this so you don't have to find out who I really am.
Yeah.
That's the impression that I got. Yeah.
I think that's a very fair reading of that death. Now this is I've been waiting to talk about this movie for this series, because this, even though it's always been low-key probably one of my favorite movies from that year, and it's just because of the fact that it feels so unique to that year, because of the fact that in a year where a lot of people were just messing around with form, messing around with story structure, this is one that is just very straightforward in the way it tells the story, in a story that is just anything but straightforward.
And classic filmmaking style. We look at the films that we've discussed and the films that came out that year again, like Sixth Sense. I mean, with the comparison, Sixth Sense and this film, like two different attacks on suspense. One's more psychological and one's more supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
But in considerable style, and and just they're like paintings, like how they were like stitched and etched and put together. And the same thing, when you have, I mean, you have something like the Cider House Rules that also came out, where you take this John Irving novel, and it's a very long novel, and way to cut out all of it and just to add the style to that, to tell the story of the Michael Caine character, and Tobey Maguire and Charlize Theron. I mean, it's just worth noting that in my mind, like 1999 was like in recent history, was one of the best years for movies.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think The Talented Miss Ripley definitely stands up there with the best of those movies, and I do think it stands up there certainly with the movies that you and I have covered from that year, American Beauty and The Insider, and how you have filmmakers and actors who are just completely at the top of their game, and they're presenting challenging material, and in ways that, to a certain extent are kind of conventional, kind of traditional, but in other ways are really make you think about the material as opposed to just experiencing it as a movie.
Well, you look at all of the movies those three movies, American Beauty, The Insider, and The Talented Miss Ripley, all of them are really, really well written, well constructed scripts, and just really good movies.
Yeah.
The variety, and the thing about all of them, no explosions, no CGI, no special effects or anything. It's just performances, direction, cinematography, good script. And we need a return to that. We need,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, is with all of the when Michael Caine won the Academy Award, I remember when his name was announced, I'm like, okay, and it was one of those things where you look at the Academy Awards, and like it was Michael Clark Duncan for The Green Mile, Haley Joel Osment for The Sixth Sense. Let's see, Michael Caine, of course, Tom Cruise for Magnolia, and Jude Law.
Yeah.
Any one of them could have won the award. And Michael Caine, in his speech, he complimented his nominees more than I think he was acknowledging. And of course, everything that he said came through. Jude Law has gone on to become a big star. Tom Cruise, of course, I think he would give his eye teeth for another role like a Magnolia.
Yeah.
But he's doing fine. Tom Cruise. Yeah. I hope he's calmed down now. But actually, true. I do want to say one thing about that. Getting off topic here. Tom Cruise, like how he reacted. What he did, I don't mind. I think maybe just the way. I think it's a kind of a thing where, but of course, emotions are so tense right now that and he's number one on the call sheet on that film, and of course one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and I guess it happened again. I guess there was a second incident, or I don't know. I thought I had read that there was a second incident, but I listened to the recording, and I think his frustration was the frustration of every actor, writer, director, screenwriter who cannot work now.
Yeah.
And so I applaud Tom Cruise for that. I don't know if I would have. I don't know. I certainly would not like to have been on the receiving end of that. But I don't have a problem with what he did.
No, and yeah, it's one of those things where it's like even as the vaccine starts to get out with COVID, it's still going to, even then, it's still going to take a while for us to get back to some semblance of normal.
Sure. And the communal aspect of things. People, the Broadway community, of course, they want to get back and they want to work and they want to entertain and, sporting events and, fans want to go. But it's going to take some time. I mean, the implementation of the vaccine is going to take some time. And I think there is going to be a long, long period of people, even if they are vaccinated, like, do I still want to go out? Because that isolation that we have all experienced for almost a year, that you just can't snap your fingers. It's just not going to be over overnight. And but I've always equated, the United States. I've always equated us like a boxer. Or we get knocked down and we get battered and beaten so many times and we keep getting up. I mean, I think the fight that we are in now is a little different than I think what certainly our generation is used to. But I hope that the people are up to the challenges, because now we have over 300,000 people who are dead, and I don't think it needed to be like that. I mean, so but we do have to look forward to change. I'm encouraged by the fact that we have a new administration who, even before they're going in, they're already putting things together to combat this. So but I think for me and my filmmakers and colleagues, like we keep saying we want to get back to work, but the time's just got to be right, because I mean, Robert Pattinson got sick, and the Batman film, I think, had to be shut down. And, if a major movie like that, like a Batman movie with, all of what they have at their disposal, if their star can get sick, anybody can get sick. And so I think it's a lot of people, like, just take the time. Now's the time to be with your families and enjoy each other. And enjoy some good movies too. We've been watching some good movies.
There are some tremendous films coming out now in this holiday season. And with that, thank you very much, Timothy, for joining me once again. I definitely look forward to the next time we talk on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian, for having me. Always a pleasure.
I'd like to thank Timothy J. Cox for joining me on the podcast. We do have a few more episodes in the Class of 1999 series that I hope to do in the next year or so to finally put a bow on that series, as well as some other individual topics that I think will be pretty interesting to people. That's it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema podcast. I hope everybody has had a safe and healthy holiday season. I know it's been a tough year. Hopefully 2021 will be better for everybody. And check us out on patreon.com/SonicCinema. Subscribe to the podcast at Apple, Google, Spotify, or the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. And continue to watch out for new reviews and discussions at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.